I want to talk about something that isn't getting more coverage, and I genuinely do not understand why. Maybe it's because Donald's brinksmanship vis a vis the Iran conflict is sucking up all of the oxygen. But this story should be on the front page of every newspaper in America. So far, during our research, coverage has been restricted to local news outlets, a handful of international news sources, and news outlets already targeted by the Trump regime, like PBS. Because what we're seeing looks like the Trump regime is using taxpayer dollars literally to pay back the private prison companies that bankrolled his reelection. And they're doing this in part by ramping up immigration arrests of non criminals in order to fill those prisons. If everything appears to be as it seems, this is not just unethical, it is a textbook example of quid pro quo corruption. And the most disturbing part, it seems like this has been the plan from the very beginning. So let's break down what's happening. Donald recently declared a national emergency, claiming ICE needed thousands more detention beds. So, his solution? Handing out massive no bid contracts to two of the biggest private prison firms in the country, Core Civic and GEO Group, both of which donated millions of dollars to his campaign and allied PACs. These contracts are not just large, they are grotesquely large. Core Civic secured a $4.2 million per month contract to reopen a 1,033 bed facility in Leavenworth, Kansas, a facility a federal judge once described as a hellhole due to the stabbing, suicides, and rampant abuse at that facility. GEO got a $66 million contract to reopen a shuttered prison in Georgia. These deals were awarded without any competitive bidding, bypassing standard procedure under the guise of urgent need. In order to get more detention beds, the Trump regime has modified dozens of existing agreements with contractors and used no bid contracts, meaning the contract is automatically given to whomever Donald chooses. And when Leavenworth city officials tried to enforce a basic permitting process, the Trump regime overrode them. Local democracy lost, and corporate greed, as is far too often the case, won. Despite Leavenworth being MAGA stronghold, city officials and residents alike are skeptical about reopening the prison. Leavenworth is a town heavily employed by prisons, but those who used to work at Core Civic's prison describe absolute hell. William Rogers, who worked as a guard at the Core Civic facility in Leavenworth from 2016 through 2020, said repeated assaults sent him to the emergency room 3 times, including once after a blow to the head that required 14 staples. And he described working at the facility as, quote unquote, just mayhem. The city's lawsuit against Core Civic describes detainees being locked in showers as punishment, sewage system failures, and interference with local police investigations into sexual assaults. And Donald is funding all of this with your money, all so his donors can profit. So let's follow the money, shall we? GEO Group and Core Civic funneled millions of dollars into Donald's campaign machine, both directly and through dark money channels. GEO maxed out direct contributions, gave $1 million to Donald's super PAC and another $500,000 to his inauguration fund. Core Civic CEO gave $300,000 personally, and the company added another $500,000. Pam Bondi, Donald's current attorney general, was a lobbyist for GEO Group. The appointed official meant to overlook legal matters with these companies was once handsomely employed by them. Let that sink in, because that, I believe, is what you call a conflict of interest. Since Donald's reelection, Core Civic stock has surged 56%. Wow. GEO Groups is up 73% because investors knew exactly what was coming. According to The Observer, last fall, internal communications from GEO Group identified Donald's immigration crackdown as a key source of potential revenue growth. GEO chairman George Zoley told shareholders that they were standing by to aid ICE and, quote, Chief Executive Brian Evans estimated that GEO could generate up to $400 million in revenues if ICE were to fill its thousands of empty beds. And just last week, during an earnings call, CoreCivic CEO Damon Heininger told shareholders, quote, "Never in our 42-year company history have we had so much activity and demand for our services as we are seeing right now." This is the payoff. The campaign donations, the no bid contracts, the fake emergency, putting the bodies of innocent men and women in cages. While the Trump regime, and especially Donald, manufacture fake emergencies in order to profit their allies, the real emergencies are being covered up. The Environmental Protection Agency, under Donald's watch, quietly dropped up to $4 million in fines against GEO over a horrific chemical abuse scandal at the Adelanto facility in California. GEO was caught spraying a toxic disinfectant called HALT without proper protection for staff or detainees. These weren't a few isolated incidents. Over 1,100 violations were cited. Detainees and staff were exposed to a toxic disinfectant, which is linked to infertility, hormone disruption, and severe burns. Some detainees said it got into their food, and others say it was sprayed on them as punishment. Career EPA staff called the drop fines a quote unquote complete surrender. But under the Trump regime, GEO walked away without a scratch and right into the hands of millions of dollars in contracts. Let's be crystal clear about how this works. Every time ICE detains somebody, these companies make money. Every new raid is a business opportunity for them. Showing up for your immigration court, you get detained. Show up to the job that helps you pay your federal taxes only to be pulled out minutes later by masked agents. Attending university with a government student visa only to be kidnapped by ICE agents off the street. ICE detentions have already surged over 50% under Donald, from around 33,000 people to nearly 50,000. And his so-called border czar, the Nazi Tom Homan, says the goal is 100,000. That's 100,000 people in cages, many of them never even charged with a crime. Meanwhile, conditions at these facilities are deteriorating fast, they're unsanitary, they're overcrowded, and they're dangerous. This is the model they're following. Fund the campaign, get the contract, lock up more people, reap the profits. If that sounds familiar to you, it should. That's because it's very similar to what happened at the beginning of Jim Crow. There was a policy in place, unofficially, of course, called convict leasing or peonage. And essentially, what happened is this: in towns across the South, local law enforcement essentially made up things that were illegal, like, I don't know, loitering or not using your paycheck responsibly. I'm not kidding. Only Black people were accused of committing these fictional crimes. And then, after they were arrested, they were put in front of an all-white, all-male jury and almost invariably found guilty. And then what happened to them? They were shipped off to turpentine farms to work the rest of their lives under conditions that have been referred to as being worse than slavery. And here we are in America in 2025, and the same horrors are unfolding before our eyes because nobody is paying enough attention. So what can we do? Well, for starters, please share this video. We need to get the message out and get more people talking about this, because if we don't do something about this, we can no longer say this is not who we are. Because quite frankly, right now in America in 2025, this is exactly who we are. Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.